Have you ever had something happen out of the blue that was life-changing? For me, it started on a sunny March afternoon. I was driving in my car and I got a call. When I picked up the phone, I heard, Suicide! And all the air was sucked out of me. I knew Sam. He was 18 years old. He lived down the street. He was kind and thoughtful. He had a lot of friends. And he had great leadership qualities. For example, he organized government leaders to work with him to create a place behind the high school where he and his friends could hang out. Yeah. But Sam was the only senior that year who wasn't going to college. He didn't want to. And his parents later told me he didn't like school. Now you may be wondering, why did Sam do what he did? And I don't know exactly, but what I do know is that many young adults feel stuck. They're searching for how they can be successful in school and in life, and they don't know where they fit. And like many young adults, Sam was searching for where he fit. Well, after I got that devastating call, it changed my life, it changed my research. And I decided to look at kids like Sam, students who aren't in the top 20% of the class, the bottom 80%. And I looked at their strengths and their gifts. And I'd like to share some of what I found with you. Because this leads us into how you can stop the spread of depression and create infectious optimism. So let's just start by thinking about how can you be happier and more successful? Why don't you pause the recording and think about that for a moment. What I have found is that most people believe that good grades and doing well in school are the measure of future success and happiness. Astute people know that grades are not only the wrong measure, they can actually lead to failure, anxiety, and they cause depression. Most students blame themselves because the world around them has taught them what I call the 3 student myths, or the myths of education. So the first myth is the myth of the bad student. That's what I call it. And it says that if you're not a top student, you're dumb, you're lazy, you're an underachiever. I'll show you in a moment why that's not true. The second myth is what I call the myth of the best student. And this myth says, if you're not a top student, you won't get a great job or a great life. And finally, the third myth is what I call the myth of the best system. And this myth says that if you're not a top student, you are failing to meet the standards of our system. And these are standards that will determine your success in life. Well, my research shows that the bottom 80% have exactly the gifts and strengths they need for world leadership, great careers, and happiness. So let's say you'd like to free yourself from these myths. What can you do? First of all, when you know that you are enough, just as you are, you're unstoppable. And there are 3 reasons that I've found that most students don't know this. First of all, they don't know they have valuable innate gifts and strengths. And I'll talk more about the gifts in just a minute. The second is they adopt these myths. And as a result, they believe they have to prove to other people, whether it's a teacher, whether it's other students, whether it's parents or a boss, they have to prove that they're good enough. And finally, they don't intentionally connect with their broader consciousness. That's where you get a sense that you're enough as you are. And this might be for you something in the spiritual or religious realm. It could be something like the universe. It could be something that you get into in a state of meditation, or when you get into a state of flow where you're so absorbed in an activity that you lose all sense of time and the world around you, and you feel that connection to this broader consciousness. What I discovered in my research is that most students, journalists, government officials, voters, parents believe these myths. And these myths are misleading. In fact, they're wrong. And I'll say more about that in a minute. These myths actually cause anxiety and depression, is what I have found. So let me talk to you for a moment about how they cause depression. Martin Seligman wrote the book Learned Optimism, and he's the foremost researcher in depression. And what he found is that depression is mainly about how you think. So depressive thinking is when you explain bad events as caused by either something wrong with you, something permanent, or something that affects many areas of your life. Now, the way these myths spread depressive thinking is that they say, if you're not a top student, there's something wrong with you, it will be permanent, it will always affect you, and it will affect many areas of your life. Most of the world around us infects us with these are called pessimistic ways of thinking, and they cause depression. And because the world around us infects us with this, they spread through students. I told you I believed these myths all my life until I did this research. So how can you free yourself and create infectious optimism? First and foremost, look for evidence that these myths are inaccurate. When you start looking for the evidence, you'll find it everywhere. As I said, I believed these myths all my life. And then when I started doing my research on the bottom 80%, I discovered the many, many, many geniuses, successes, world leaders, Nobel Prize winners who were not good students. Second thing you can do is replace myth thoughts with reality thoughts. So for example, you could say, if I'm not a top student, I'm like many successful people and geniuses. You could say, I have innate strengths and gifts that can give me the life I want. Or simply, I am enough. I've come to believe there is nothing wrong with you, no matter how you're performing now. I believe what's wrong is that we ask the wrong questions. We ask, what's wrong with you if you're not meeting certain school standards or other standards? I think that's the wrong question. I think the question we should be asking is, what's right with you? And if you'd like to go further in thinking about what's right with you, there's a quick free assessment that's based on the hidden gifts that I found. I call them gifts that conflict with school. And takes 7 minutes if you want. It's on my website, and you'll get some information about your hidden gifts. So I'd just like to leave you with the thought that no one else has to change their thinking. You don't have to convince anyone else. If you want to adopt more optimistic thinking is associated with success, and it also makes you feel better, makes you happier. If you adopt more optimistic thoughts or more realistic thoughts, those are the optimistic ones I showed you, you will be infectious, even if you don't convince anyone else around you. Your energy will change, your attitude will change, and that's infectious to your success and happiness.